everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Life Podcast. I'm here with a new friend, but good friend, Carlo Orozco. Did I do it right?
Yes, sir.
Come on, entrepreneur, business owner. He currently owns a Lifehouse Healthcare. He's the owner and primary provider there, correct? Awesome. Let's get right into it.
Yeah, well, when somebody offers me an opportunity to speak, yes, I will speak.
Come on. Good deal. Well, let's get right into it. This podcast is all about just finding out about people, because a lot of times we see people in what they do, but we don't really know who they are.
Yeah.
So let's get right into it.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about who you are, where you're from, about your upbringing, anything like that?
Yeah. Well, I don't think I'm supposed to say this, but I'm from south of Boise, as they say, around these parts. And so, but I grew up in the 80s in San Francisco, and so that was a rough time to grow up in San Francisco, but it's a lot rougher nowadays. I was a son of a pastor, so my parents were pastors. We call ourselves PKs, pastors' kids, and so we moved around a lot, man. I think I tallied exactly how many schools I went to from the time I was a kid till I graduated high school. It was about 22 different schools.
Wow.
Between elementary, middle school, 3 different high schools, went to high school in Utah, Southern California, Northern California. So it was wild. And, met my wife in Southern California. And then, there was just a hungering for the outdoors where, kind of brought us to where we're at now here in beautiful North Idaho. But yeah, my wife and I, we've been together celebrating 15 years married this year.
Come on.
20 years total together. We were married for 5 years before kids, married 5 years without kids. So we had 10 years before the kids came around. So yeah, that's great, man. We have a 10-year-old son, 8-year-old son, and a 2-year-old son, and don't make any girls. And I think I'm blessed for it. So
there you go. So you mentioned 22 schools.
Yes, sir.
Through your, kindergarten through 12th grade. So there had to be a lot of times where you were in multiple schools in the same year.
Oh, yeah.
How was that?
Dude, the hardest thing that I learned, I had the blessing of having parents that were pastors because I saw them really being very social with people and very caring, having the heart of God, if you will, very relational. Yeah. But the dichotomy of that was such that, I was raised to live as a Christian and having the heart of God and love for people, but also being the new kid perpetually. So one of the hardest things that I had to deal with growing up is never having friends, like solid best friends. I saw these kids that would, go to school for many years together and they knew each other. And I was always the kid that was the hang around, coming around. So that was rough. But I think it was the blessing in that it forced me to utilize the skills of really being relational, right? So who you see today is a product of that, right? I just strike up a conversation with a random stranger, no qualms about it, just completely vulnerable and candid. And yeah, that's who I am. So
now you said you were in Southern California or whatever.
Yeah, south of Boise.
South of Boise. You did school in Utah. Where did you, when you decided to come to North Idaho, where did you come from? What place were you in? Were you already married? Talk about that. Yeah.
So that's a great question. So the reason actually we chose Idaho is contrary to what was going on during the pandemic and everybody was leaving California. I got my master's in nursing to be a board certified family nurse practitioner back in 2015. And when I did that at the time, my goal was always, I said, hey, I'd love to see what it's like to have my own practice, right? And it was kind of an ambitious goal and just kind of a thought out there, not really something that was set in stone in my heart, but more something that I just kind of had thought about. The more time I spent working as a nurse practitioner in Southern California and kind of learning the profession itself, I realized it was going to be a lot of work, right? And then so we started looking at places that we could do that in the United States. I think currently there's 29, I might be wrong on this, so you'll have to fact check me on this later, but I think there's 29 states in the union that have full practice authority for nurse practitioners, which means I can practice independently from a physician, right? And the only reason why that mattered, it's not because I don't want to work with physicians. I love working with physicians. A lot of my great best friends are physicians. I love collaborating with physicians, MDs, DOs. But in California, if I wanted to open my own practice, I would literally have to pay a physician like tens of thousands of dollars per year to have them on the license of my business.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
So whereas in Idaho, being a full practice authority state, I can have my own practice. I don't need to have a physician tied to that. So what led to us choosing Idaho was a friend of mine who is he's actually a nurse, anesthesiologist. And we started looking at different states in the union, and we were talking about like Texas, we were talking about Tennessee, we were talking about Idaho, and a few others like the Dakotas and such, where full practice authority is it. And, ideally also with more traditional, wholesome family values, beliefs with what I was raised with, right? And so, my buddy, he and his wife and their kids ended up moving here, and they're like, you should just come check it out. And, as they say, one thing led to another. And then, being the good husband that I am, I brought my wife here during the summer to show her the beauty of North Idaho.
Yes.
Not in the winter, because you don't want to do that. And so, of course, she agreed. And so here we are.
Yeah, dude. I mean, in North Idaho, there's not many places on earth that are more beautiful than North Idaho in the summertime.
Yeah. You're not
It's
kidding.
so cool. So how long have you been here in North Idaho?
Let's see. So we bought our place, I think it was like April of 2020. We made the move. We moved literally the week of Christmas. And so we got here, I think it was the 22nd or 23rd of December 2020. So we're looking at, we're on our 5th year now, I think it is.
Okay.
Yeah, 5th year this Christmas.
And how long have you had the practice, Lifehouse Healthcare?
So that's a great question. So, part of going back to the conversation, what led us to come out to Idaho and understanding the research of being a independent business owner, I really had it on my heart to be a good steward of what that was going to look like. And so what I did is I had this plan in mind. I said, well, I'm going to get there and I'm going to work in the community and network with people and kind of learn the lay of the land. And so, one of the first jobs that I had when I was out here is I was working with Northwest Specialty Hospital in Post Falls and doing internal medicine with them. Great organization, love what they do, their values, what they stand for. And then I also did some time working with Kootenai Health and their surgical specialties. And through that time, and I had a few other things that I was doing between here and there, I really learned kind of what was the niche out here. What did the community need out here?
Yeah.
And so in 23 was when summer of 2023 is when we opened up Lifehouse Healthcare. Confidently, I did that at that time because I think I had a grasp and understanding in terms of what the community needs were and how I could fit as part of serving the community. Yeah.
That's cool. But this probably sounds a dumb question, but what do you do? Like how much can you do? How little do you do?
Yeah.
And I know your view, and just in talking with you outside of here, I really admired your view on healthcare. Can you talk to me a little bit about that? I guess there's a lot of questions. What's a nurse practitioner able to do and not do? And then also just talk to me about your view on healthcare and how why there's a niche in North Idaho.
Yeah. So, how do I answer that? What's a nurse practitioner? There was a time there where I was like, do I go to med school? Do I, just continue on? And I was a registered nurse in the ER. I did ER trauma for a few years, and I was a flight nurse. I worked on a helicopter too. And so had a lot of experience in nursing. And I got to the point where I was like, I want to do more to be involved in the direct patient care. And so a nurse practitioner versus a physician, it's just different educational routes. The nurse practitioners have a stronger nursing background, bedside rapport with clients and patients, and MDs, DOs, they go traditional. They go to 4-year college. They get a biology degree, et cetera. They go to med school, do 4 years, then they do a residency, right? And so both routes are tough and they're hard in their own ways, but it really, I think, comes down to the level of care that you want to provide care at and what specialty you're in. So I chose becoming a family nurse practitioner because I worked in the ER, worked with a lot of kids, a lot of families, and I really wanted to serve the community. In fact, my thesis and when I did my master's was how nurse practitioners can serve the community through emergency rooms, through the flow of patients, because when there's lacking primary care, people use urgent cares, people use emergency rooms. And there's a disparity. And, so you come in, you have like a hypertensive crisis, your blood pressure's through the roof. And then I say, all right, here you go, Mr. Miller. Here's a prescription. Follow up with your primary care doctor. Well, then you try to do that. It's like a 6-month wait. So then you end up back in the ER with high blood pressure, God forbid a stroke, heart attack, et cetera. So that's kind of why I jumped into the route of being a nurse practitioner. So there's some very stark, very contrasted differences between the two fields. But, getting to why I chose that specifically as a family nurse practitioner is I wanted to do family medicine. And so there was a time, in this country, in this world, where you had a medical professional you would go see, and he took care of your grandmother, he took care of your parents, he took care of you, your kids, carried the black bag, would do house calls. And I kind of want to get to that phase of what medicine is. Some of my physician friends refer to it as the golden age of what medicine was. And I remember talking to a good friend of mine who was a doctor back in Southern California. And I remember sharing stories with him, and he shared a lot of what it used to be like and what it is now. Medicine and healthcare providers have become more of the worker bees for these larger corporate entities. Right? So anyway, I digress. I got into family medicine because I wanted to basically provide a whole centered approach care to the family, right? So in regards to what I do, it's funny. I just hired a young gal to work our front desk and answer our phones and be a receptionist. She's phenomenal. But she was telling me her mother the other day was saying, like, do you even know what he does? Because what does he do? I just found out everything that he does. And I guess it's this understanding that I have that normal everyday people understand what I do. Like, hey, Dave, I'm a nurse practitioner. What do you mean? What do I do? Don't you know what I do?
Yeah, I know.
but people don't really know that, right? Because they're like, well, what can you do, right? So I often get people to show up in my office like, well, can you fill out this FMLA paperwork for me? Can you do a disabled, placard for me? Can you? And I'm like, yeah, I can do a lot of things. I can do most things other than do general surgery or, give you anesthesia, So yeah, I can do, I throw down some stitches. I can read x-rays, EKGs. I can do a lot of things, and that's the joy of what I do is that being well-rounded in that brings to me the confidence level of being able to be a healthcare provider in the community that says, hey, I can help you, wherever you're at. So the model of healthcare that I've decided to embrace as part of what Lifehouse Healthcare is what we call a holistic healthcare model, right? And so a lot of people don't understand maybe what holistic healthcare means, but by definition, holistic healthcare is basically a whole-centered approach to healthcare to an individual. And so the 4 pillars, if you will, that I use to address that by is I address people's physical health as well as their mental health, their social health, and their spiritual health, right? And, we can get into what all those things mean at their own level, but essentially it's, when you and I are sitting down to do a healthcare intake and, I see you for the first time, I'm addressing all those different things because it matters, On a social health perspective, if you're gainfully employed, you're going to be happier. You're going to be probably physically healthier versus the person who's not. If you're homeless or if you're in transitional housing or if you're in a broken home, all those things matter, right? Those are social health. Spiritual health matters, right? Because we have to have faith and hope in something that is greater than what we see here and now. Otherwise, if you can't have that hope and that faith in something greater, how can you participate in the present and be proactive in that, right? So a holistic healthcare approach is what I've taken to addressing families as a whole, right? So everything from, I've seen as young as a 21-day-old baby in my office to, an 89-year-old patient of mine who ended up, being referred to hospice and having dignity in his passing and his transition, right? So, and everything in between, all ages, right? Just treating the whole person at that level.
Yeah, well, I know when I met you and kind of found out about what you do and all those types of things, I scheduled a physical with you. So I'm seeing you in a few days. Yes. And I'm hoping that you're not throwing down stitches or putting a splint on me. But and I was attracted to the whole idea of, someone sitting down with me and just kind of like what my concerns are, just kind of looking at everything to just, talk to somebody because with 5 kids, all play sports. I totally understand. We've been to urgent care, I don't know, 50 times over, my 27 years of parenting, probably more than that. And we've been to the hospital maybe once or twice. Yeah. It's just not something, fortunately, nothing we've had to do. But it's crazy, you go in for urgent care. It takes, usually we're there like an hour and a half. And I might, and I'm not being derogatory or anything like that, but I might see the doctor for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. And it's usually, I was like, okay, well, I'm sure the person I'm seeing has a good competency level, but I kind of want to see the person that I came there to see, like the healthcare provider, not the receptionist, not the person that's taking my child's weight and height and, and I know those are all important. Yeah. But so I was definitely intrigued by, what you do because it's not the norm, and I think that in talking to doctors, they're they're a little bit trapped. I mean, they have to see X number of patients a day to make it. Is that accurate? Yeah,
no, you're correct. So you highlight something that I just brought up earlier, which is to say that what we have. So I always tell my patients this when, excuse me, when they get frustrated about, I've got to send in a prescription that requires a prior authorization, right? Like, for example, right now, Ozempic, semaglutide is a big thing, right? And, most insurance companies weren't approving it. And so, I tell patients, I got to submit these this paperwork, there's all this red tape. Healthcare in the United States, Western medicine is insurance medicine, right?
Yeah.
So
completely.
what that means is like you have to go before the court, plead your case as to why they should cover it. And essentially your health lies in their hands, right? We saw recently there was oh gosh, I forget his name. There's a gentleman that via X reached out to the administration to say, I need this new breakthrough treatment in antineoplastic treatment, so a cancer treatment, because it was not available to him because insurance wouldn't cover it. So, Department of Health has to get on the phone and say, hey, we're going to make this happen for you, right? But essentially, healthcare providers nowadays, you fall into the trap of, hey, you go to healthcare, you go into healthcare field, sorry, you go to school to go into medicine, go into healthcare field, and then you come out to be a product of the system, right? So you mentioned it. All those people that you meet when you go to the urgent care, to the ER, to the doctor's office, they play an integral role in what your healthcare visit looks like. Certainly for us as providers, but it becomes more of that because now we have to see patients back to back, back to back, back to back. Right. Why? Because we're doing insurance medicine, which means in order for me to make a certain amount of money to bill your insurance, I have to see XY amount of patients per hour, right? And that's the tough part, right? So going back to your previous question about what I do, the reason why I've taken the approach that I have, and patients that come into my practice, they know this. When you come and see me the first time, I schedule a 1 hour visit. And in fact, sometimes it goes over. I remember I had a gal one time that showed up and I was 15 minutes late from my one visit to her visit. And she's like, no, I'm happy to wait 15 minutes because it's my first time seeing you. And I know if you're late to my visit, that means you're going to spend time on my visit too, and probably be late to the next person's visit, right? But it's understanding that people have a story to tell, and it's my job to try to get to understand who this person is, so I can give them the best advice possible, right? In terms of what their healthcare is. Corporate healthcare has robbed healthcare providers of that, the ability to have that relationship, right?
Right.
So I say this a lot to people, and I'll tell you this because you're going to be my patient here pretty soon. Yeah. But in healthcare, and most people that are in healthcare understand this. There is nothing proprietary about medicine nowadays. Nothing. In the world of information age that we're in, listen, I used to Google my symptoms, before going to the doctor's office. Now I have patients that are Googling their symptoms, right? And so we used to have this joke in healthcare, years ago where, people would go to the Google School of Medicine to go Google their symptoms and find out what they have, you know. And the running joke now is like, if you Google hard enough, everything leads to cancer, right? And so you have to be careful what you're searching. Right. But there's nothing proprietary about information now that we live in the information age, let alone now we're at the cusp of artificial intelligence, where now we have people going to ChatGPT or whatever artificial intelligence source they're using to say, hey, my symptoms look like this. What do you think I have? And I've literally had people tell me, hey, I asked ChatGPT about this thing, and the 3 possible differential diagnoses that came out are these 3 things. What do you think? And I'm like, yeah, it's not incorrect. Dave, what do you do in a world where there's nothing proprietary about what you're doing? So there's nothing proprietary about what we're doing. You're racing against time because it's corporate healthcare medicine, and you're in a box of you have to provide medicine according to what Western medicine is, which is insurance medicine. The only thing that you can do is take yourself out of that equation, right? And so for me, what I've said is like, people know they'll come to my office, they'll get probably the same answers when it comes to medicine. The difference is I'm going to have a relationship-based approach that says, hey, when I see you at Costco, I'm like, hey, how are you doing? How's the wife? How's the kids? How's your grandma Flo? There's not that boundary of we have this transactional relationship where you come to my office and that's it, right? And so what I've really decided to hone in on is how do you develop relationships to serve the community, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what we're doing. The service that I have, there's nothing proprietary about that. But what I do have that I have a gift of is loving people, right? We talked about that recently. You came to our men's breakfast, right? The 2 most important commandments are love God, love your neighbor. So if I can exemplify that in the work that I do, then I'm not subject to the 3 different areas where I'm constrained in what I do. Now I can, transcend that limitation, right? And so I have the freedom to have relationships with my clients and love them in a genuine, honest way. I have people that don't know what to do with that. Right. I meet them and I'm like, this is what we can do. And they're looking at me like, I don't know if I trust you, man, because you're so straightforward, very open, very vulnerable, very candid, very loving, very relational, and some people are just shocked by that.
Yeah,
And then there's other people that are
absolutely.
like, I'm telling everybody about you, and a lot of my business nowadays is word of mouth because of that reason, right?
Right.
So,
right.
yeah.
I think, we were talking about my daughter who's 22. My oldest daughter's 27. My next daughter is 22. And she's in that, like, what am I going to do in life type of stage, like, what's my career going to be? And she literally, we had this discussion like 2 nights ago. She's like, I want to pick something. I want to do something that isn't going to be replaced by AI. And a lot of the things that I think are going to be replaced by AI. And I was like, so we were naming things, the plumber, the electrician, the barber. I don't want a robot cutting the sharp object near my hair.
Nips your ear.
But we talked about the service industry, and I said, people want authentic relationships and someone to hear them, and AI can't do that. Okay, now talk to me about it. You said your knee's kind of bothering you. Like, when did it start bothering you? Or like, what's going on? Like, why do you think, why do you think it's not normal? Why do you, I want someone kind of giving me something back, because, you're paying for a service, but I want it to be a service, not a transaction, which you just said earlier. And that's what it's unfortunate. I feel bad because I have I've got a few friends that are doctors, and they kind of feel trapped, because they're in this, they have to do what they've got to, they've got to do what they've got to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely very, very intriguing. Plus the difficulty that I have with ChatGPT, because I'll use it, or use Grok or whatever. You have to know which questions to ask.
Oh yeah.
And you have to know how to frame the question. Yeah. Because my wife and I we'll try to come up with it. We've done this where we try to come up with like, okay, I'm going to ask ChatGPT or my daughter and I I'm going to ask ChatGPT this, and you'll ask them. We'll come up with completely different answers. And it's how we ask the question.
Let me jump in on that. So I think that's kind of where I would say to your daughter, right? If your daughter was here asking me like, Carlo, what do you think I should do? What I would say is, you really have to figure out where your heart is in terms of what you want to do. And what I mean by that is, how do you want to serve people? I've always said this. It doesn't matter what you do. If you're scrubbing toilets, washing dishes, making food, sending astronauts into space, everything that we do is a people business. And if you don't know how to value people, love people, and see people the way that God sees people, you're gonna keep repeating lessons in life until you figure out that what is. So having the heart to serve somebody is key, is important, right? But going to the point that you just made, I remember having this conversation with my wife many years ago when I was in the ER, and I remember just being frustrated when this is back in the days when we would throw Tylenol and ibuprofen at everybody that came into the ER. And so I remember parents bringing their 1-year-old child with a burning fever, 105-degree temperature, 104.7 or something like that. And I remember telling my wife, I'm like, man, can you believe these parents they let their kids cook? I mean, figuratively, I know that's the phrase nowadays with a lot of the younger crowds, but they let their kids like burn, and have fever. And they bring them to the ER to like almost say like, look, my child has a fever, because they felt like they weren't being seen. They felt like they weren't being heard. And so for my complaint to be valid, you had to see how bad it was, right? And I would say, can you believe they're doing that and not just like helping their kids? And, my wife, bless her heart, she's a lot more wiser than I am sometimes in these circumstances where I'm just like so, thick in it. And she's like, have you ever thought that maybe people don't know what you don't know? And, that gave me a pause, because it humbled me real quick, because, and this is, I'm sorry to say this to all my physician friends and nurse practitioners, et cetera, but really, Western medicine teaches you that there's pride in achieving the pinnacle of excellence, which essentially this authoritative movement, which is like, well, no, I'm the physician here. I'm the provider here. It's my way. You listen to me. If you don't like it, go somewhere else. And that disparity that was created, the chasm that was caused between patients and providers, is what leads to a lack of trust. And so what I realized is, you're mentioning, ChatGPT and all these different artificial intelligence modalities. Clarifying questions is something that can't be necessarily replaced authentically. Right. So, it's one of those things that when people come in and see me and you say, well, why you see me today, Dave? I got knee pain. Okay, well, how is that different than, traditional knee pain? Like, what happened? Did you fall? Did you twist? When did you notice it? Clarifying questions helps you get to the answer of it, to something that's authentically true, that helps us kind of break down what could really be going on, right? It's what makes you a good diagnostician in essence, right? But clarifying questions is what is required when you are developing relationships with people, when you want to serve people, and when you genuinely love people enough to ask them those questions, right? So I used to work in the urgent care many years ago. I loved working in the urgent care. And at one point I was so frustrated with, being an urgent care provider because it was a lot of the same stuff. And what I realized in my frustration was once against my pride and like, how do people not know this? Which is crazy because now we have the information age, AI, people are Googling their own symptoms. And so now it requires for us to ask questions of the patients like, well, why are you coming to see me? So one thing that I learned to pivot and change in my practice was when I was in the urgent care, somebody would come in and say, why are you here today? I have a sore throat. I learned to ask this question. I said, what's your biggest concern? Or what's your fear? And people would be caught off guard by that question.
Yeah.
Because at first it'd be like, what do you mean? I want to make sure I don't have strep throat, right? Or like the mom would say, well, I want to make sure it's not like measles. What it does is it exposes the vulnerability that sometimes we're often afraid to show. Or if I say, hey, Dave, what's your biggest fear with your knee? I don't want to have a knee replacement. Okay, now we go down a different direction. Well, why is that a thing? Well, my dad had a knee replacement and, it got septic. He ended up dying because he had a bad joint infection. There's so much fear that people have around healthcare that when it's not explored with clarifying questions, it allows those hesitancies, those fears, the lack of trust to remain. So my goal has become pretty simple. It doesn't matter what you come to my office for. It's like, how can I have a relationship with this person? How can I, love them, serve them, care about them? And the onus, the responsibility is on me to get to know you so that I can appropriately care for you in that sense, right? Yeah. So I don't think we'll get replaced by AI in that sense, but who knows?
No, I don't think so. And by the way, I actually will be talking to you about my knee. I don't have the ability to make stuff up very well, so I was like, oh, it's the knee. But no, and I think that I like that point that you touched on because when I did financial planning for 15 years, and when we were into the pandemic, everything went to where we're doing Zoom calls.
Yeah.
And it was just like a huge blow because so much of what I like is, this is why I do this podcast, just because I like sitting down with people and talking to them and hearing them. And when you're physically eyeball to eyeball, belly to belly, whatever you want to call it, you can see their body language. You can see, like if you ask them a question and they're like, they take a deep breath or they look up or they pause or whatever, that's way more than, like if I'm typing onto a screen or that's why I get so frustrated if I'm talking to somebody, especially like with my kids with healthcare stuff, and they're talking, but they're not looking up at me. And I know they've got to get through all these, whatever it is, like 97 questions. But I'm like, like if they're looking at me or they're looking at my kid, more importantly, and they say, what's your biggest concern? What's your biggest fear? Or tell me about this. And you can see the person, like, oh yeah, that's, like they have that reaction or whatever. Yeah. And it's like, okay, obviously we need to stop here and talk about why did you have that reaction? Or why did you take a deep breath there? Or why did you pause? And that's missing. So man, I hope this niche that you found works great because that's the kind of healthcare I want from, when I bring my especially my kids, when I bring my kids to somebody, I want them to feel like that it's not just, okay, this is one of the 27 that I got to see today. It's like, no, it's not one of 27. It's my kid. So it's one of one. That's kind of how I want to be treated. I want to be one of one. And maybe it's selfish or whatever, but that's the kind of care that I want. So what's next for Lifehouse Healthcare? I mean, talk to me. Like where do you see this going? I mean, I know it's so early, but.
Yeah. So, I think it was this year we finally started doing a little bit of marketing. And, it's a weird time to be alive in history where we're making this. I mean, I grew up without cell phones. I'm sure you can appreciate my statement. And now all of a sudden we have handheld mini computers that you have everything available. And so trying to figure out how to get the message out of what we're doing has been a challenge. But I think what I realized is that, it reminds me of, going back to biblical scripture as a Christian man. I always look to scripture to see how it speaks truth and life into what I'm doing and where I'm at. But I remember it was Paul that said, I watered, or what is it? I planted the seed, Apollos watered, but God's the one that gives the increase. And so what's next for us is really up to God to decide in terms of what's going on. It's no mistake that I marvel at God's sovereignty in everything that we see. And it's no mistake that when the pandemic happened, there's a geographical shift of persons, right? And so you can see how that shift has impacted a lot of people. Like here in North Idaho, the real estate market boomed, right? And a lot of people jumped into real estate, said, I'm going to go into real estate, and they capitalize on it. But I've been more of the, how do I sit back and watch to see what's happening? And more importantly, how can I be used in a way that serves people? And I'm speaking genuinely from a heart that has had to learn humility in the healthcare field, where we're taught to have pride in our knowledge, education, and speaking with authority. And I'm the one that, manages your healthcare. But it's taking a seat back and learning, hey, how do we serve a community? So I've taken a step back to kind of figure out, like, how do we do this best? And what I've seen happen is, so first of all, this year we've hired a few providers to kind of help and join us. We have a female nurse practitioner. Her name is Allison Smith. She's phenomenal. I always talk her up. I've had people from my church and my community go see her, and they speak highly of her. We've had another young gal who's going to be joining us as well, to be doing women's health and possibly midwifery or as a midwife. We have Zach Uttinger, who is Zachary, he's a psychiatric nurse practitioner. And so just trying to figure out ways to serve the community. Yeah. In what the community needs. I know not all the community wants traditional Western medicine, just like I know not all the community wants naturopathic medicine, right? But what the community wants is to be seen, to be heard, to be validated in what their concerns are, and where do we go from there? And so where we go next is really that big question mark. I don't know. But what I can tell you is, I'm here for as long as the good Lord ordains me to be here, right? Yeah. And to serve the community. I really have a heart for people in this community that are in broken homes, people that come from past of addiction, recovery. As you know, I work with a lot of the foster kids and a lot of collaborations with community, Department of Health and Welfare that are, sees kids that are in the foster care program, and just teens and adolescents in that sense. I have a heart and passion for those that are in the mental health community, right? And so it's just figuring out, how do we serve community in that way. And I mean this when I say this, and not in a way that's predatory and transactional of what healthcare is. And so it's being a good steward of, when I get a new client that has a pretty robust psychiatric mental health diagnosis list and a lot of medications, how do I manage that, right? I had this today. I had a young man that came and see me, and he's got a lot of medications that are on. And I looked at him and I said, hey, my goal is not, to just, keep this as transactional, but like to get to know you. And how do we get to a place where less is more? And there's something that's of fruit that comes in your life. That's something that's good of your life, right? That's my goal. Dave, I tell people all the time, I'm the king of making goals for people. But at the end of the day, like, I can sit here and make all these goals. All right. Like, we got to make a goal. You got to, be able to run a half marathon next year. And those are my goals for you. I really want to get people to a place where they can come up with their own goals, and I can partner with you in those goals and help you achieve them. Right. And in that sense, I see myself as just kind of a co-pilot, right? I'm just here to give you the best advice, the best recommendations based on what information we have available, and how to help you guide you and navigate you through the healthcare system, right?
Yeah, so. That's good. That's good. Yeah, it's. I think it's needed, and I'm excited. I'm excited for what God has for you, man. Because I think it's going to be good, man. It's going to be cool. So how many children do you have?
3 boys.
3 boys. Yeah. Okay, that's right. So talk to me, like, if you're because starting a business with a family, 3 boys in a new location, kind of like. There's a lot of people, you say south of Boise, but over half the population is from south of Boise.
Let's be honest, come on.
If you're coming from somewhere else and you're starting new, like, what advice would you give to someone that's like, dude, I'm here, I'm starting a business. I'm also trying to be a dad. I'm trying to be a good husband. I'm trying to, have family time. But also, when you start a business, there's definitely, there's grind, there's hours, there's time that you got to put into it. Yeah. Talk to me about some advice for somebody that's looking to do something like that.
Yeah. Well, so from my heart, what I would tell you is this, as a Christian man, I believe, first and foremost, I believe in God, and I believe in His Son, Jesus Christ. And as my personal Lord and Savior, I believe my identity, first and foremost, my first ministry is as a child of God, as a man of God, right? And so that's my very first important thing. The second thing that comes right after that is I'm a husband. And let me tell you, as somebody who's I'm on my 15th year, we'll be celebrating 15 years December 4th this year, 20 years together. As you know, as a married man, marriage is not easy. It truly requires, as Ephesians 5 says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave his life for the church. It really requires me laying down my life every day. And what that means for me is, putting away my own pride, my own selfishness, things that I want for my wife. Right after my wife comes my 3 beautiful boys. And there's not a day that goes by that I'm daily that I could be a better father in some ways or another, right? I'm constantly taking an inventory of could I have done that better? Could I have spoken better to my kid? Could I have spoken life into him better, right? Everything, as a healthcare provider, I'm looking at my kids, how much screen time they have, because my kids love video games, right? Yeah. How much screen time they have, what kind of foods they're eating, how much exercise they're getting, right? How much sleep they're getting. I have my middle child, if he doesn't get at least 9 hours of sleep, it's not good news, right? So I care about that for them, right? Then after that, after those 3 things, my fourth ministry, the fourth thing that's important on that list is being a nurse practitioner in my business, right? And so that's not to say that those are my patients. It's not to say that I don't care about them, but it's to say that because my first priority is being a son of God, a child of the Most High, that my priorities are going to be that I ethically, morally care about your health, just as I believe God cares about my health, right? And so, but because I make time for my wife and my children, I will also be much better as a provider, as a business owner, somebody that can integrate into the community, right? And I'm not pointing out anybody specifically or taking shots at anybody, but if my goals were backwards in that sense, if I'm sacrificing my wife, my children, my personal ministry as being a son of the Most High, then I care about me and how I can make my business grow. That means that I'm going to be predatory and transactional in how I see the people come into my office. Does that make sense? And so I believe the equation has to be that, right? Otherwise, it's not going to prosper. And so as a husband, as a father, I love being a husband. I love being a father. I want to give a shout out to Lakeland High School. Well, Lakeland Junior Tackle. My kids play for, the football junior tackle team. So love Lakeland Junior Tackle. I love coaching. I've coached my he's now in 5th grade this year, my 3rd grader now. I've coached kids for 3 years in football, and I've seen that growth. I've seen them grow. I love coaching kids in the community in terms of character, integrity, ethics, right?
It does.
Right. We're raising kids to be part of this community for the long run, right? Not just for a short term. So all that goes into play into being a business owner, but my priorities are set and they're straight in that order.
That's awesome. And I would say, as a father of 5, kind of on the other end, 5, my youngest is 16. So I've got 3, past 18 now. And man, it goes by quick. Ben, cherish those times with your kids and, going to their games and all of that and spending time with them, because it goes by, quick. It's crazy. My oldest daughter got married this summer, and it was just, for that week up to her wedding, just all the, remembering carrying her home from the hospital, remember?
Oh my gosh.
Just all the little things are man, that was it felt like it was a week ago. And then all of a sudden, she's, adult and married and all that kind of stuff.
It's emotional, man.
It is, dude. It was emotional for me. Well, gosh, I've enjoyed just sitting down and talking with you, man. Thanks so much. And boy, I often say, I think I probably say this a lot, but I think I do the podcast probably more for selfish reasons. just because I like sitting down with people that I find interesting and hear their stories and get to know them. And so thank you, man. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah. I want to say thank you to you, man. I mean, who knew I was in your coffee house February of this year. It was February of this year. I sat down there for a meeting, and who knew that we'd be here today? Right. And then I happened to meet you at a fundraising event and
kickball tournament.
Yeah. Kickball tournament where you guys kicked our butts. So shout out to 2A companies for taking the title. But, it just shows you that God's sovereignty is at work. And I'm so thankful to have met you and for this opportunity, truly, because I'm just here to share what we're doing. So
yeah, sweet, man. Hey, if you like hearing people's stories and just learning about different people in our community or whatever, like this, share this, follow this, subscribe to our channel, and just tell people about it. But thanks you for tuning in, and thanks for checking out Life Podcast. And gosh dang it, I will see you next week. Bye-bye.